Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world. A very warm welcome, especially to people who are tuning in from Canada. I'd like to say thank you so much for joining us today. I'm with Amanda Logue from the Canadian Software Testing Board, which is also a TMMi chapter. Hi, Amanda. And Erik van Veenendaal, who is CEO of the TMMi Foundation. My name is Debbie Archer from iSQI, and we are delighted to be hosting this session with the CSTB and welcome Erik to talk to us about TMMi and its growth and proliferation and how it's become the standard and test process improvement. Our involvement with the Canadian board has been really exciting recently, and we are now the authorised exam provider for all iSQI exams and an exam provider for TMMi. So we have a lot of queries and questions about TMMi and other curriculum, so it's really good to have Erik here today to tell you everything you're going to need to know. Amanda will join me in asking some questions of Erik later, but please feel free to pop your questions in the comments box, because I know that Erik is really keen to answer those questions as he's going through his presentation. So don't be shy, please do share any questions you might have. Erik, I'm going to hand over to you and ask you to crack on through the presentation. And Amanda, you and I'll come back later and we'll have a chat to Erik as he's finished his presentation or during it, depending on what questions come in. Thank you, Erik.
Yeah. Thank you, Debbie. Here's my presentation already. Let me see if we can get to the first page. Yeah, that's done. Okay, well, welcome, I would say, from Canada or whatever you are. I have a presentation lined up, an hour and a half probably, where I'll be talking about improve your testing with TMMi. My name is Erik van Veenendaal, as Debbie already said, the current CEO of the TMMi Foundation. And this webinar is organized together with iSQI, but also with the Canadian TMMi local chapter. I will explain what local chapters are in a minute. This is who I am. Oh, sorry, next slide. Topics. I will do an introduction about who is the TMMi Foundation, so who's the organization behind it, who are local chapters. It's going to be a very short one, but at least you know who is talking, who is discussing. And then we'll move into the meat of this webinar. We'll talk about the context of test improvement, but especially, of course, we talk about the TMMi model. Then we move to an interesting topic, often addressed: how does TMMi function in an agile context? I must say it's only 1.5 hours, so everything is more or less on the surface, but at least we will address these topics. And if you have any further questions, feel free to ask them. We'll talk about TMMi assessments. We held a worldwide user survey, which was published earlier this year. And again, I will address that. And finally, I would say last but not least, I will talk about how to get involved in the TMMi Foundation, what are steps to take, how to become a member, what courses are available, how to get involved as an organization to adopt TMMi and things like that. Okay, these are the topics. My idea is that I will address a topic, and then I will also ask Debbie or Amanda, are there any further comments, questions from the audience? So there'll be a natural break after each, you might say, topic to address these issues if they are. Who am I? My name is Erik van Veenendaal. There's a website. You can look at the website. You'll find all kinds of things. As you can see, I have written in the past some books about testing and related topics. I'm also a former vice president of the iSQI, which some of you may know, current CEO of the TMMi Foundation, and I have won some awards. Okay, let's start with, as I said, the background. Who is organizing this? Where does TMMi come from? What's the organization called? TMMi Foundation. What are so-called TMMi local chapters? And let's look at those. First of all, the foundation. It was founded way back in 2005 with two main objectives. On one hand, we would like to develop the TMMi standard, so a test improvement model to become the standard used worldwide. We are, by the way, a non-profit organization. So all the money we make goes back into the community. And the second thing we would like to do, or was planned out to do, is to develop a framework for TMMi assessments. The idea is that if you do an assessment for TMMi in China, or one from France, or one in the US, or in Canada, they should all follow the same guidelines, if you want, which makes the assessments comparable, but also allows for certification for an organization. So two main goals: develop the TMMi standard and also develop a framework for TMMi assessments. The foundation itself is based in the UK, but of course you cannot conquer the world from the UK. At least that's what I think. Some people in the UK may think differently. So a number of years ago, we said, okay, we also need local organizations in countries that will support the cause and objectives of TMMi. And these are called local chapters. I will explain them on the next slide. Okay. The model itself was published in 2010. As you can see, as a starting point already, the model was not developed from scratch. There are iSQI syllabi, which have great content. There are standards from IEEE. There are standards from ISO, testing standards. There's a model called TMMi. There are all kinds of ideas. There are best practice surveys. So all these inputs were researched, looked into, and actually a major input towards TMMi. It today is available in many languages already. You can see here English, Chinese, French, important I guess for Canada, Spanish, also maybe important for people from the US if listening, Portuguese, and I think there are a few more as well. Important to understand already up front, it's an independent model. Independent means it's independent of a life cycle. It's independent, so it can be used with agile or sequential. It's independent of a test method. And also you can use it with TMMi, but also independent of TMMi. And it's great to state that today, after all these years, it has become a leading model in the world for test process improvement. In fact, IEEE did a survey not too long ago, stating very clearly that if you look at which models are most often used for test process improvement in the world, the number one by far today is TMMi. As I said already, local chapters, very briefly but important. There is a Canadian TMMi local chapter. That's important to tell. So Amanda, which you saw earlier, is the head, I think, of the TMMi local chapter in Canada. And the idea is they raise awareness locally. You cannot do that from the UK. They do local marketing, like this webinar. They ensure, they don't do it themselves, to ensure that training becomes available in the Canadian market. They ensure that assessment services become available for the Canadian market. They are, if you want, the point of contact to the local community. And if needed, they will also take care of translations. In this case, if we talk about Canada, it will be also available in French. Luckily, there's also a French TMMi local chapter, and most of the documents are also available in French. So it's just a model. I think the syllabi, exams, it's all also available in French. Today, we have, as you can see, 26 local chapters covering 54 countries. And you can see here the dots. I guess this one is Canada, here US, Mexico. There's quite a few from Europe. There's a lot from Asia, and so much you can see already in Africa. So it's scattered out the world, and it's growing, to be honest, very fast at the moment. Okay, that was, if you want, very briefly the introduction. Who are we? What are we doing? What's the foundation? What are local chapters? Let's now look at more like the content, the meat, you might say. Let's look at test improvement. Why is it needed? What is test improvement? And also, of course, let's look at the TMMi model before addressing all the other topics that I mentioned earlier in the slide. Those of you who are, I would say, working on day-to-day in testing, in software development, probably recognize many of these challenges. This is the world I think we're living in. The IT systems we're making today are critical to the success of a company. There is in many domains, we talk about digital transformation. We are making systems which are bigger and bigger and bigger. So they are bigger in code size, they are complex. We are using new technologies, artificial intelligence sometimes. We're not having one system development as a system which is linked to other systems, and that linked to other systems. So systems of systems. We have many different devices sometimes. OSs, browsers, there's security, there's outsourcing. And it's not like, wow, we have all the challenges, but you have all the time in the world. No, it has to be done yesterday. And also surveys, research shows, if you look at software development and the number of defects they are delivering to testing, they go down only very slowly, which on one hand is an achievement because of all the challenges during software development. What I'm trying to say on this slide is that if you look at IT today, if you look at software development today, we have as testers many testing challenges. And this is why this poster came from a project I was involved in recently. It says, "Gib niemals auf." That's German. Never give up. And to be clear, the frog is a tester or testing team. And if you don't believe me, this slide is I'm sorry, it's a slide in Dutch. But to explain to you, the word softwarefout means software defect. You can see here clearly, and this is very easily taken from day-to-day newspapers. All these software defects are in fact, I would say, worrying our lives here. Thousands of prisoners released too early because of a software defect. Medication shortage in hospitals because of a software defect. And we are in a pandemic, as you always know. 112 is actually 911. Stopped functioning because of a software defect. Boeing, software defect. Chrysler, software defect. Americans removed from their house by a bank, software defect. This is the world we're living in, and it even gets worrying if we talk about nuclear power plant problems, software defect. This is the world we're living in. And this is why test process improvement, or test improvement if you want, is necessary. When we consider test improvement, I think always there are multiple directions, multiple angles to tackle this problem. There is, first of all, I would say iSQI. iSQI, by the way, has an alliance with TMMi, so we are working together on some levels. iSQI takes care of getting good people, ensuring that those who work in testing or those who do testing, business analysts, developers, have the right skills ready for the job. There is test automation, which is another angle, trying to make things more efficient, trying to ensure that regression testing you are covering things, that in performance testing you're actually capable of doing things. And there is process. And these three together can actually make it happen. And the balance, to me, depends on the context. Sometimes you work in a healthcare environment, and then there is much more, I would say, process orientation. Sometimes you work in a much more agile type of environment, and then there's more people orientation. But there's always these three angles. And process has been less popular, I think, over the last few years, because it was done wrong in the past. But you need some process. It's like your corporate memory. It's good to have new engineers or people who move between teams, and only something which is documented can in fact be improved in that sense. If you look at one hand on the, I would say, the testing skills or the tester, the people side of things, I think today, if you look at testers, it's not a tester who does iSQI courses only. Today, testers are, they call them T-shaped people. They need to have domain knowledge, development skills, scripting skills, soft skills. So it's also interesting if you look at the previous slide that this is not about, oh, I need people to do an iSQI course and they're ready for the job. No, we want people to do much more than just testing skills. To get ready for a job means you need domain knowledge. I worked for Philips Healthcare for a while, and at Philips Healthcare, they send every tester to hospital twice a year. Not to check them up, but to allow for them to understand how the product is used in practice, so they can make better and more effective test cases. Have domain knowledge, build domain knowledge. So in addition to process, we need testers that have testing knowledge, domain knowledge, development, requirements, scripting knowledge, and the right soft skills. And this applies to the tester, but actually to everyone who is doing testing. So also to a business analyst. So also for a developer. If we then start looking at TMMi, or make the step towards the process side of things, you could ask, what is TMMi? What's a test improvement model? And the way I explain it is that suppose you, as a person, are sent to an iSQI advanced course, test manager, which is a 5-day course. And you're asked to take a list of all kinds of ideas, improvement ideas, based on this course. You probably, after day 1, you have 5 ideas. Day 2, you have 5 more ideas. It's actually 5 days. So we end up with, let's say, 30 ideas in the end. The question is, which of these 30 ideas fits best with your maturity? Which one fits with where you are as an organization? And this is, I think, where test improvement models come in, like TMMi or TPI Next if you want. They help you to understand where am I in the maturity and what are most likely effective and efficient next steps towards more maturity. So we have on one hand all these, I would say, content-based models, where you can find all kinds of practices, ISO standards, iSQI courses, books which are available. But the question is, which of these ideas best fit with your organization? Okay. The TMMi, the model, you might say the heart of the whole presentation. As you can see already here, it's a model which has 5 levels. The great thing about TMMi is level 1 is for free. That means that you can go back to your company and tell them we are level 1 TMMi. It basically means we exist, okay? It also means, by the way, I've learned that the majority of organizations that I come across are still level 1. So if you're using TMMi and you are level 2, you are among the better part of testing organizations. You can see here 5 levels, and every level has a number of, they call that process areas. You might say these are the focus areas which makes most sense to take the next step. And I will explain level 2, 3, 4, and 5 briefly hereafter. It gives you, based on what I told you in the previous slide, priorities. It gives you the right focus, because if you're level 1 and you want to move to level 2, it doesn't make sense to look at the things which are level 4, level 5, because you're not ready for them. You should look at the things which are level 2 and maybe look at level 3 a little bit. So it helps you to understand what are the next steps to go for maturity. Already important to understand, I think, is that in TMMi, there are goals, objectives, and there are so-called practices. You might say there's a what, the goal, and there are practices how. The only mandatory part of the model is what? The goals. The rest is like suggestions. If you do it differently, feel free. So in that sense, TMMi is a guide that guides you on test process improvement. 5 levels. Let's look at level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And level 1 basically means it's for, as I said already, it's for free. Some things you may recognize. Testing is always under pressure. People are not trained for a job. There is some test planning, but it's late. There are test cases developed, but ad hoc. But mainly, success depends on individuals. It's very much what I call a hero culture. If we look to level 2, more interesting, we call that managed. Then testing is separated from debugging. That means also on unit level, on component level, there is a testing process. And I've learned over the years that I think if you get developers also doing testing, that's a huge, huge improvement. They are very knowledgeable persons. Level 2, we have test levels defined. We're not saying, oh, there is UAT testing. We understand what UAT testing means for the organization. We have system testing, system integration testing. There is a defined, if you want, test strategy across our projects. If you talk to management, they will still consider testing to be something that the added value is actually late in the life cycle. We, of course, as testers know differently. It's planned, so we have test planning, but again, maybe not in the beginning. It's late in the life cycle. There is progress tracking and reporting. We are applying test design techniques. That's good, including exploratory testing. We're doing some reviewing already, and in the end, we are able to answer the question, is the product built as specified by the requirements? On level 2, we have 5 process areas. 5 areas where we should like to improve. And basically there are 4, I would say, I call them project-oriented process areas. Level 2 is very much a project-oriented improvement level. There is test planning, test monitoring and control, test design execution, and test environment. What does this mean? It means that we are trying to focus level 2 very much on getting the things in place that a project needs to survive. There is no luxury in level 2. Test planning is not about writing a plan, but it's about do you do risk-based testing? Is there a risk analysis? Do you know how to focus on things? Is there thorough estimations? And once you have a plan, how do you monitor against that? Until you take control actions. Do you make the right test cases? That's design. Using techniques. Do you execute them? And do you do incident management? And hopefully in an environment that's as much as needed, real life. These are all, I would call them, project-oriented process areas. Basically, level 2 means we are getting better at finding defects. And step by step in the TMMi model, we are growing towards getting better at preventing defects. That's level 5. Level 2 is finding more defects, finding more important defects if you want. There's one exception, which is the one on top, which is called test policy and strategy. And this means from the start of doing TMMi, you have to involve management. You have to talk with them and say, okay, why are we doing this? I would say, is there a business problem? And you start discussing, what is testing? Are we doing TMMi, yes or no? What's the role of automation? What are the objectives of doing this? You might say, this is about discussing things like standards, compliance, mission, ambition, organization. Is it independence or what are things to be doing? Is iSQI something we want to do, yes or no? In the end, what the policy does is make sure we are all working towards our same goal. TMMi is not and can never be an objective. The objective is a business problem because we're investing time and money into TMMi. That's the idea. So in addition to, I'd say, these 4 project-oriented levels, there is also test policy and strategy. Talking to management and together setting a context, setting some starting points regarding testing. And in the end, I don't think the policy itself is that important, but talking to management about testing is. And also making clear what are the things we are trying to address. What are the things we're trying to solve. Next step is, after 2, is level 3. And level 3 has 2, you might say, main characteristics. On one hand, it's early involvement. It means that by doing level 2, by showing added value, you are now involved in testing from the start, from requirements engineering or gathering onwards. And the other thing is, it is focused on sustainment. That means anything we improve at level 2 is now institutionalized at level 3. These are 2 main, I would say, topics of level 3. You typically see a lot of companies doing level 2 that actually automatically also mean level 3. There's a natural break between level 3, and level 4. We also have a defined test lifecycle now across our projects. It's integrated in the development lifecycle. And test planning starts early. Processes are defined across the organization, not per project anymore. And important, testing is now recognized as a profession. Of course, level 2 this is important, but level 3 we are actually taking it to the next level, you might say. And testing now also considers non-functional test types. Level 2 is much more focused about functionality, although sometimes you want security or performance to be part of it already. But if the system doesn't do what it's supposed to do, it doesn't make much sense to do it fast, I would say. And also peer reviews are now performed. Again, early defect finding. Also level 3, we have 5 process areas. Interesting enough, if you look at this, this is much more an organizational level because we talk about the test organization. And the test organization doesn't mean there needs to be an independent test organization. There are different models available for that. There's a test training program for those who are doing testing. That's not just testers. As I said already, there is a test lifecycle defined, integrated with software development. So things like iSQI, getting training done, is typically something which belongs at level 3 because it's structured throughout the organization. It's not like, oh, I have 3 testers, let's send them to a course. No, it's part of your policy. It's part of doing it consistently the same way. If someone becomes a test manager, he always goes to an advanced test manager course. For those people working in an agile team, they always take an agile testing course. Examples. There's non-functional testing, as I said already, and there's peer reviews. So again, this is about moving forward and doing things early. That's what level 3 is about. And this is a picture I typically use to explain, if you want, what is level 3. And of course, this should be, and I'm saying should be, free when you do Agile. Because this should always be the case in Agile. What I'm saying here is, if you do requirements, user stories, at the same time you do test planning, you start thinking about the risks, you do estimate them, and think how to approach them. And of course, we know if you start analyzing requirements, user stories, as testers, we find all kinds of comments. We find defects early. If you do design, At the same time, we do test design. And of course, parallel design means you find defects. Sometimes in design, sometimes go back to requirements even. Same thing if you're coding, you do test scripting. Again, there's interaction. And then, of course, there's execution, test execution. But it just means we have a parallel integrated lifecycle, or integrated activities if you want. If you don't want to talk about the lifecycle. So early is one characteristic of a main characteristic level 3. Another characteristic is, oh, this doesn't look very good. No idea why. As I said already, is sustainment, institutionalization. And this comes from a client of mine who had what I call a clock, a star clock. I'll explain the concept, although you can't see it, you can't read it. And basically had a clock where they had all 12 months and said, okay, all the activities which we have to do in the context of, let's say, test improvement or test organization that are not typically project related, we will actually plan based on a clock. For instance, a yearly audit is done, a yearly appraisal with our people, making a training plan, having performance indicators analyzed. All these activities were actually scheduled based on clock. So they knew every month we have to do something. So it's a way they handled sustainment, ensuring that it happened every year again. Level 3. Very briefly, because we can talk about this a lot more. Level 4, level 5. Level 4 is called measured, and level 5 is called optimization. It's not called optimized because you can never be optimized. There's always, I would say, something else. And here we talk about test measurement, because level 3, we got a consistent process across our projects. So now we can start measuring and understanding better. Hopefully using things like gold question metric for them, because which metrics make sense. And the same thing, product quality evaluation. We now don't do just security testing or performance testing. We want concrete data for that, metrics, advanced reviews. Sampling, tuning the results of the reviews to update your dynamic testing approach, using approaches like perspective-based reading. And level 5, of course, is optimization. On top, defect prevention. Of course, you do it earlier as well, but now it's in focus. There are prevention teams. Basically, you might say level 2 is like, oh, we found a defect. Let's solve it. And level 5 is, oh, we found a defect. Let's prevent it from happening next time again. That's a different focus, different mindset if you want. There are things like quality control, based on theories from USA. And there is test process optimization, meaning we constantly scan the market, looking at what can we use as a new tool. Oh, does it mean anything for us? There's a new method. Oh, it's interesting for us. There's something like AI. What does it mean for us? So we're looking at becoming better all the time, you might say. 5 maturity levels. Most organizations and most, I must say, approaches will cover level 2 and level 3 quite easily. So these are not things we don't know. These are things we often don't do. Very different. Level 4 and level 5 is also, I think, from a testing content point of view, quite often a challenge if you want. And you can see already what I said earlier is TMMi is from detection, always prevention. We don't have time to look at the model in detail, but just to make sure we have, as I said already, 5 maturity levels. Each level has process areas that have goals, and the goals must or shall be achieved to satisfy a process area. We have practices, so level down. This is what we typically expect people to do based on such a goal. But if you do it differently, that's allowed as well. And there is all kind of informative text. There are sub-practices, examples, typical work products, elaborations, all these things you can use. Suggestions if you want. So it's rich with all kinds of suggestions to help you take the next step. As an example, very brief example again, is process area 2.2, so level 2, second process area called test planning. And you can see here there are 5 goals, 5 things we need to ensure happens. We would like people who are level 2 and who are investing in becoming a level 2 organization. Yes, you perform a product risk assessment. You establish or document a test approach. You have test estimations, which are reliable. We develop a test plan. I'm not saying a test plan is like a 20-page IEEE 829 test plan. It could be a PowerPoint. It could be a mind map, depending on what you need. And there is commitment to the plan. So these 5 goals are mandatory. And there are, as you can see already, for each goals, what they call SP specific practices. These are the things we expect you to do. But if you do it differently, hey, up to you. This is how the model, I would say, works from a content point of view. Debbie, at this point in time, are there any questions? Or Amanda?
Hi there, Erik. At the moment, the questions are general, so whether we're going to be recording this session or not. So the answer is yes, and we've popped that out there. So for you specifically, no questions at the moment. Just a shout out to everybody, really, because I can see we do have people watching and tuning in. So please do pop your questions into the comments box on Facebook or LinkedIn, and we'll make sure that Erik can answer those for you.
Okay, thank you.
Smashing stuff, Erik. We'll pass back over to you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we did basically have the 2 first topics, I would say, addressed. The first one being who are we? So we are the foundation based in the UK, non-profit, but especially much more important, we have local chapters around the world. Basically your, might say, local point of contact. Any questions you may have, please ask them. In this case, it's a Canadian testing board for Canada. I briefly discussed the model. I'm saying briefly because there's a lot more to tell, but you got some flavor, hopefully, the model. Also the needs why we're doing this. And let's move to another topic, which is what does TMMi mean, or is TMMi still needed in an agile context? And again, this is a food for thought, and we can have a discussion for sometimes even hours for it. But let's have a few slides on that so we have a flavor and understand what's happening here. First of all, also from the user survey that we took, 78%, so almost 80% of the TMMi users also use at least part of their projects Agile. So does TMMi fit with Agile? I would say from practice, the answer is already yes. What we've developed as TMMi already is that, of course, going back to the previous slide, you can look at this slide and all the context, but you can imagine if you work in a sequential environment compared to a, let's say, agile environment, the practices, the methods, the techniques are different. I guess you all know this. So what we developed is a paper, a document which is called TMMi and Agile, which basically explains if you're doing test planning and estimation, what are methods you can use in an agile context? If you are developing a test approach, how would you do this in an agile context? If you're doing monitoring, how would you do this in an agile context? If you're doing, and we can go on. So basically for every process area, for every goal is translated into what do we expect from practices in an agile context? And my statement is, and I think many of you have heard that before, is agile is not, I mean, you're still developing software. We're still testing software. We're doing, if you want, the same things, but we're doing them differently. So the goals and the process areas largely or very largely still apply. So the how, sorry, the what is still there, but of course the how is different. Going back to Agile, and also do we have a quality problem? Because there are people, I think, who say, well, we moved to Agile, so why are we doing TMMi? We can talk about that if you want for a while, but it's interesting. There is maybe you know this, is an annual State of the Agile report. It's already in its 15th year, and they have produced a report yearly, as you can see. And they also measure what are the Agile benefits. And don't get me wrong, from this presentation, I'm a big Agile fan. But the last, I think, 3 or 4 years already, the top 5, although in different order, is the same. Agile benefits are, we have a better ability to manage changing priorities. Great. We have better project visibility. Great. We have more delivery speed or time to market. Perfect. We see increased team motivation. And we also see increased team productivity. These are great benefits from doing Agile. But what is missing from this list? And if we have a live audience, I would ask live audience, please shout. But to me, one thing is missing consistently for the last few years, which is product quality. So basically, we're not seeing a majority of the companies reporting, we moved to Agile, and I would say automatically, we also saw our product quality problem has gone away. Why that is, I think people move to Agile for different reasons, so it isn't focus, but that's again a different discussion. What we're seeing is that the product quality problem we're having in traditional organizations is not automatically going away just moving to Agile. It also has to do with, I think, TMMi often misunderstood. People say, oh, I read this model and it's about how writing big processes and no, it's not. It is not. First of all, TMMi, the first step is define a policy. Start from your business objectives. Think, why are we doing this? What is a problem you're having in the business? And also important, only the goals, the what, need to be satisfied. Don't use, I would say, TMMi as a tick list, as a checklist. Focus only what has added value. That's what this is about. And if you are reading something and think, hey, we're doing it differently, we have an alternative practice, that's perfect. Start understanding the practice as defined. So it's also, if you're using it in an Agile context, and also I think in any other context for that matter, use TMMi with common sense. I think what happened in the past, also with CMMi by the way, is people start using it as a checklist, as a tick-off list. No. Start thinking. Interpret the model. In the user survey we talked about, or we want to talk about later on, one of the questions is, what's your recommendation for others when using TMMi? And one of the major recommendations they had is always interpret the model to your needs. And the same is choose the process areas that have most added value. And especially this is true for let's say, TMMi Level 4 onwards. And no one says you need to have large and detailed processes. In fact, in doing an Agile, I think you will probably do more training, more people focus, and less detailed processes to get more out of the people. That's fine. That's perfect. On the other hand, Agile in practice, to be honest, there are many organizations that are, let's say, Agile-like or doing something with Scrum. Not all are doing it as intended. And if you go to a conference on Agile testing, and I've been to quite a few, they all talk about unit testing and test automation, exploratory testing, and sometimes about the definition of done. But there is more. And TMMi reminds you of the critical testing practices that are needed. So are needed to achieve software product quality. If you have a retrospective and you find issues in testing, if issues in product quality, look for the testing practices that can help you to solve these issues. And you do need some process or some documentation. But the question is always to balance. And the balance is different in an agile versus, let's say, a sequential or healthcare or defense organization. And of course, agile brings things. This is great because business value is agile, right? So I always said on the previous slide, focus on the things that matter. So if you really understand agile and have the right mindset, you will use TMMi in the same way. Find the things, the process areas, the goals that have agile, have added value. Less process, more training, more people focused, but you still need some process. Simplicity is also a characteristic of agile. It sounds simple, but it's not that simple. Write things as lean as possible. So in some ways you might say what agile brings is critical thinking towards TMMi. And that's good. Don't just dominate the model and say, let's do it. Do it in the right way. And the nice thing about always is there are many iterative steps, sprints in Scrum. That means after every 3 weeks, you can think, hey, what is the next improvement step we can make? Which is very different than, let's say, a sequential life cycle where you only have a iteration every 9 months. As an example again, let's take the same process area, test planning. And I think typically in Agile, you have two major phases, release planning, iteration planning, or sprint planning. And of course, test planning is not, again, about writing a test plan. It's about upfront thinking. We have a 3-week term or a 2-week or a 1-week, whatever we have. How will we approach that most effectively, most efficiently? That's what this thing is about. And we'll have the same goals as we saw before. But we're doing it differently. Lightweight. Excuse me. There is an approach called risk poker. Maybe mind mapping for risk assessments. A test approach. Hey, we don't talk about X criteria, but we have definition of done. Of course, there will be no entry exit between the test levels, I think. It's like a poster, if you want, on estimation, planning poker. But planning poker and ensuring that the testers are involved and ensuring that testing issues and testing tasks are addressed. That's important. Activities will be relevant in the test planning, ordering of test tasks, priorities, having the right people, making sure that this whole thing is a team effort. So you have commitment from the team. So basically what you're seeing is that, and this is my I would say, observation is, it applies to Agile. It's the same topics, same process areas. It's the same goals, but you're doing them differently. Because moving to Agile did not, for many organizations at least, take away the software product quality issue that you have, the software product quality challenges that you have. I'm now talking in this presentation about Agile. We have a similar approach for DevOps, where there's also a paper available for those who are interested. We're currently, by the way, working on a project about TMMi and artificial intelligence. So what does this mean, TMMi and AI, or how can we benefit, or I don't know yet. Okay, so TMMi and Agile. Again, a short question, I think, to Debbie. Debbie, any questions from the audience at this point in time?
Erik, that's quite spooky. Yeah, we were actually asked, how does TMMi specifically support map to DevOps practices? So one of the things you just alluded to, there is a paper regarding that you mentioned.
Yes, I don't think we'd have time to specifically deal with the whole DevOps thing as well in this presentation. But on the website from TMMi Foundation, there is a button that says TMMi Documents, and there you can find a guideline how TMMi can be used in a DevOps context as well. Yeah, I think the 3 ways of DevOps, for those that makes any sense, are then dealt with and mapped to the TMMi process areas and goals that's available. Yes, Debbie.
Perfect. Amanda, have you got any questions at the moment for Erik?
Not at the moment. I haven't seen any come through. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Erik. We'll let you crack on.
Okay, thank you. And yes, I can do. Okay, so we talked about already, as I said, the organization, the model, how can you apply, even an example, how can we apply it in an agile context, but as Debbie already asked, or someone asked from the audience, the same or a similar approach applies to DevOps. By the way, TMMi Foundation is, as I said already, is non-profit. That also means that everything we produce is freely available from the website. So there's no payment like with ISO or with CMMi these days. Please download, please use, that's why we produce it. Okay. Something about assessments. As I said already in the beginning, as TMMi Foundation, not only did we develop a TMMi model for test improvement, we also developed an approach for TMMi assessments. So assessments in that sense is I think this is needed, is to find the areas that need to be improved. Where are you on the way? Are you level 1? Are you level 2? Which define recommendations, determine which maturity level, benchmarking. For instance, if you're a financial organization, how do other financial organizations compare? And interesting, the results are sometimes used as a criteria for suppliers. I'll give you an example of Malaysia, for instance, where today, if you bid for a government project, IT project, that also considers testing, so a testing project in that sense, you must be or shall be at least TMMi Level 3. So for a testing service body, needs to be Level 3 in order to bid for a government project. These are things I think that happen with assessments. And as what Humphrey already said in the past, if you don't know where you are, so if you don't know where you are on the maturity level of TMMi, a map being TMMi won't help. There are all kinds of assessments. There are sometimes quick scans being offered by service providers. You may just take the model and do a self-evaluation if you are capable of doing that. The two which are actually governed or defined by the TMMi Foundation are what we call informal assessments and formal assessments. Both provide you with strengths and weaknesses. Both provide you with recommendations. But of course, as you can expect, the informal assessment is less rigorous than the formal one. And only with a formal assessment, there are different rules around that, you can actually formally determine a maturity status. So only based on a formal assessment, you can actually achieve formal certification. How does it work? Very briefly, is that the TMMi Foundation has defined a document called TMAR, which means TMMi Assessment Method Application Requirements, TMAR. And in this, we define requirements for informal or formal assessments. An organization that sees this as a market opportunity will then develop a method, their own method, based on these requirements, and apply with the TMMi Foundation to become what we call a assessment service provider. And typically they also have people who understand this and can become accredited TMMi assessors or lead assessors. So what you have around the world is companies that call themselves assessment service providers that actually run assessments with companies, both formal and informal. As I already said, only the formal assessment can lead to certification. Now, if you as a person think this is interesting, you can also as a person become a lead assessor or assessor. The main difference being that a TMMi assessor can only do informal assessments, and a TMMi lead assessor can do informal assessment and formal assessments. How do you become one? By applying But there are three, I would say, areas where you have to show that you have the right knowledge and skills. One is testing, and we're saying here at least iSQI foundation is needed or similar. In this way, we're looking at least advanced modules. For TMMi, we'll come back to later on. There is also a course where you can take an exam. So you have to show and prove based on TMMi professional, sorry, that you can also understand TMMi. So you understand on one hand testing, and of course understanding testing makes that you also are able to do the right recommendations. And on one hand there's TMMi professional, so you can show people I understand TMMi as well. And the third angle is you understand assessments. Here you have completed a TMMi assessor training course and you can start. And once you've built enough hours, more skills, more knowledge, says here already, at least 75 hours of practical experience, you can apply to become a formal assessor. So there are, I think, something like, I don't know, I think about 100 assessors in the world. There's something like 40, 50 lead assessors in the world. And once you are accredited, there's a 3-year cycle. So 3 years from today, you have to show you still have valid experience in these areas. It's maybe an opportunity. I will come back later on with how to get involved. But again, this is one where you can get involved as an organization or as a person. So we have, as said already, 2 types of assessments, informal or formal. This is led by an accredited assessor. The other one is led by an accredited lead assessor. An informal assessment can be done by one person. A formal, always at least 2 persons, one being the accredited assessor and one being the accredited lead assessor. The method you're using here is free, but here it has to be a formal method that complies to our requirements. Informal, one type of evidence, that's a big difference. With formal, there's always 2 types of evidence for every finding. That means interviews and a detailed document study. And I said already, the main difference is this is a formal rating and the basis for certification. TMMi assessments. If I don't hear from Debbie at this point in time, I'm assuming there are no questions. If there are, Debbie, please pop in and send me the questions. I'm ready to answer them. If not, we move on to, I think, a very interesting part is the TMMi user survey. So who is using, if you want, TMMi, and what are benefits that can be achieved with TMMi? The survey, this is an important thing to say up front. I worked also for almost 10 years at the university, is designed and also has been performed together with a university team. We had several universities being involved in this, so it's not just the TMMi Foundation doing their own survey. We work together with some Austrian, some German, Irish, and I think a UK-based university do this for us. The idea is to address market needs, understand the benefits much better, but also challenges. And all organizations that we had on file that were assessed since the beginning of TMMi Foundation were invited to actually participate. And to our, maybe to our surprise, I don't know, but at least we've got a return rate of 64%, which is sorry, extremely high. And there are formulas I've learned in which you can calculate based on the population a confidence level. And that means the confidence level of this survey is 85%, which means actually the real value is within plus or minus 5% of the measured value. So it means that actually we have a survey that's not just a survey, but it's quite a reliable survey. It's also interesting to see that most people who actually participated had a experience level of at least 4 years with TMMi. So you might say those who are participating understand and know what they're talking about. First thing we asked, or a few things we asked, but again, by the way, if you want to have the full survey report, it's available on the website for free, happy reading. But one of the highlights I'm taking out of it. First of all, where is it being used? And I'll focus on the one on the right first. What we see is that a large part of our users come from the financial background. So we have insurance companies, banking, making up 37% of the TMMi users. As an example, the Bank of England is doing TMMi. Another example would be the Bank of China is doing TMMi. I think that means something. I guess in many, I would say, banking, financial institutions, digital transformation is a key issue. Also, I think you would see that compliance, for instance, is a big issue in the financial domain. Another big part, 30%, are IT-based companies, IT service companies, or you might say testing service companies. 30% of the users come from that background. And the third group is more scattered, but it's a group like that are in the safety critical domain. So healthcare, automotive, defense, that's the third group. Where is it being used? We also looked at test levels and test types. What you can see here is that the majority is used for system testing, system integration testing, and UAT testing. 80%, 90% used that way. I would say a much lower percentage, yet an interesting percentage, about 40% also use it for unit integration, and component testing. More than 50% also use it for component integration testing. So it is used, I would say, quite commonly beyond these three levels: system testing, system integration testing, and UAT testing. On the other hand, you could ask which test types. And I'm using, by the way, iSQI terminology here. Which test types are being used? Functional testing, regression testing, performance testing, again, are the three main ones. But again, I would say also these, which are around 50%, are quite commonly being used. Usability testing, reliability. And 46% of our users is also using it for security testing. This, I think, gives you a flavor of where is TMMi being used in that sense. We talked about it briefly already, but also from the survey we learned that 78% of our users is using Agile for at least part of their projects. And going back to the question earlier on DevOps, 57% of our users is using TMMi with DevOps. In fact, almost 70% of the users, and this is interesting, I think, is using multiple lifecycle models, using sequential, using Agile, but actually looking at what's the nature of this product, what's the nature of this project, and which lifecycle model fits best in this context, which to me makes much more sense than saying, let's do anything with Scrum and there's everything with Scrum. Again, where is it being used? How is it being used? On the next slide, we talk about benefits, but of course, benefits cannot be achieved without investments. So we also looked at what are typical costs doing test process improvement, doing TMMi. And you can see here, distribution, 3 to 5% is a pretty high number, 38%, although there also are quite a few that invest more. If I have to say a number, I would say typically something like 5% of your testing cost is invested in TMMi. That means training, consultancy, assessments, writing a process, implementing processes, developing a template, setting up a best practice library, things like that. Direct cost, indirect cost. And what can be achieved through TMMi? This, to me, was I would say, almost surprising outcome. But nevertheless, a very interesting outcome. 88% of the TMMi users, user base, claim, and I have some examples on the next slide, that they are achieving product quality benefits based on TMMi. And for some that means we have less defects. For some it means reduced product risks. For others it means something different because they all define it differently. But 88% of the users product quality benefits. That's huge. And this is what we're talking about. This is, we started in the beginning with we all have these problems. We also talked about moving to Agile is great. But maybe Agile and TMMi together will give you more benefits. 77% of the users state they have test efficiency benefits, increased productivity, accelerated software delivery, reduced costs, compliance. That makes sense, I guess. Achieve TMMi certification, standard compliance, 84%. But also people benefits, higher morale, more distant. I mean, if you are a level 3 organization and you are respected as a tester, it's much nicer to work there. If you are working in an environment where you actually can apply the things that you learn to the courses, it's much more rewarding if you want. So also 77% come back with all kind of people benefits. We also ask people and the users, can you please quantify your benefits? And there's much more in the report, but you can see here some numbers. These are from level 3 organizations, level 4, level 5. Test predictability increased by 70%. Number of tools removed from 10 to 6, because basically what you do is you align your processes. So there's no need to have same tool twice or different tools. Higher product risk coverage, now 80%, automotive. This is healthcare, by the way. IT company, DDP, defect detection percentage. Meaning the percentage of defects you can find versus the actual number that you have found. From 60 to 70% system testing. Level 4, time to market reduction. Again, DDP, a bank. Development cycle reduction, a bank. Reduced cost of external testers, a bank. Insurance company, DDP, to production, improve 30%. Test automation, now very accurate. Test efficiency, IT company, again, insurance company. So what you see is that with TMMi, and this is important to give your own, I would say, study and make your own business case. With TMMi, you can achieve benefits like this. And this is why we're doing it. But of course, it still depends and starts with, is there a business problem? Are your customers currently happy, your user community, with your level of product quality? If the answer is yes, why invest? But if there's an issue, this may be the way forward. And the final last one on metrics, you might say, is on trends. This doesn't come from the survey, but in general, what we're currently seeing, as you can see on this slide, is we are seeing a growth in uptake. And to me, one of the explanations is that we are building more and more local chapters. They do local marketing. They make people aware of TMMi locally. As a result, what we're seeing is number of TMMi professionals is growing. Last year was the best year ever. Despite the pandemic and problems in some countries, a growth of 7%. And even more important because ultimately we are not looking at certifying people. We are trying to mature or certify an organization, build better test organizations, test departments, or teams doing better testing. We saw a 39%, which to me is incredible, growth in number of formal TMMi assessments and almost the same number for certified organizations. So if we continue this trend, let's see what 2022 is. Debbie, any questions at this point in time?
Hi, yes, a question for you about the growth, 39% in 2021. Do you know what was driving that growth?
It's often hard to predict, to say that accurately. But I think what we're seeing is that we started with local chapters, I think about 4 years ago. And of course, if you are a local chapter, have to address and do marketing in local community. In the first year, that's going to be more doing marketing than achieving your targets, I would say. And some of the local chapters have now become much more mature. They have been doing this for 3 or 4 years. As a result, you see actually these local markets actually picking up. You see that there are assessment service providers in that market, lead assessors in that market. There are training providers in the market who actually are able to give people the benefits, understand TMMi. So to me, of course, you can think I'm convinced about the model. Yes, on one hand, but I think I'm very much convinced on local people making a difference. And local TMMi, local chapters are getting more and more active, and they make, I think, this trend happening.
It's having an impact. And Amanda, from the Canadian board point of view, are you starting to see an increase in interest from companies?
Yes, from some companies, but then more, we have some people that are looking for the TMMi training for the professionals and for the assessors, which Erik's going to speak to a little bit later on how you can get involved. But we do have some training that's scheduled to be coming up later in March and April, so people will be able to get some training there.
Fabulous. Okay.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Amanda. I think the first step always is do your marketing, and I think you're doing this also through this webinar. But the next step thereafter is TMMi is more difficult than people think it is. It's not a question of just downloading a model and starting. So actually taking a let's say 2-day class or whatever, which is called TMMi Professional, which I will address later on. You're right, on the next slides. Is probably your first step in a local community, because it means you give people knowledge, they start understanding how it works, they can go back home and start applying it. And yeah, it's step one is spreading the knowledge and sharing knowledge across the community, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I find too, like if people are taking those courses, then they take them back to their own organizations, and then that's really how we'll get that chatter going. And then they'll start taking that back and getting people excited about it in their own workplace.
Correct. Yes. Okay. Final topic. I think we're more or less on track for the 1.5 hour, I think, is how to get involved. So you've learned about TMMi, you learned something about Agile, assessments. Hopefully you found the study we did with universities interesting on the results that can be achieved. You can maybe also use it, as I said already, in your own business case to justify an involvement, but how to get involved. As TMMi, we developed a sort of, if you want, career path model, saying that there is a number of steps to take, and ultimately you want to achieve something. And we just talked with Amanda also that there is a course upcoming. There is what we call a TMMi professional course. Some details come on the next slide, but that's typically a 2-day course. For those who have done foundation in the past, iSQI, it's a foundation course, but it does give you the flavor of the model. It does talk about Agile. It briefly talks about assessments, implementation, and based on that, you would have I would say, thorough understanding of what TMMi is all about. If you want, you can afterwards take a exam and become a certified TMMi professional. And exams, of course, are also run through iSQI, the organizers of this webinar as well. So basically, a TMMi professional, I would say the same with iSQI Foundation, is the basic level of knowledge. And depending, of course, where you are, some say, oh, I want to become an assessor. That's possible because there's a stream, as you can see already here, without explaining all the details, from TMMi professional to become a TMMi assessor and lead assessor. So there are additional courses to take. There's also different requirements in terms of testing experience. There are requirements in terms of TMMi, but based on that, you can step by step become from assessor professional to become a assessor or lead assessor. There are also people say, well, this is not my market. I want to be a test consultant in the Canadian market that helps other organizations to become better in testing. And because in the end, it's about getting better in testing. It's about achieving more levels of product quality. You might say TMMi is a tool, not the end result. And we have also a stream for that consultancy. We call that Certified Test Process Improver. And if I'm correct, there's also a first Canadian person already at that level. So there's also a way to say, hey, I'm this one. Based on that, I want to become a certified test process improver. And by the way, these three are all listed on the website, so you can all see who is actually where. If we move back to TMMi Professional, which is the first step, it is typically a 2-day training. A syllabus available, and there are what they call recognized training providers in the market. I think worldwide around 30 who deliver this training. Some do it class-wise, others do it online, which is nowadays, I think, a popular way with something like called COVID, I think we have. And in the end, you can do an exam and become a certified TMMi professional. In some countries, in some areas, exams are important, certification is important, in some less. To me, it's about getting the right level of knowledge across. You learn all about the model. There's a book called Little TMMi, which can help you, a guideline. As I said already, all documents are freely available on the website. It's also available in French, which may be interesting for the Canadian market. And the exam, by the way, is a 1-hour exam, 40 questions and 26. You got it, you passed, and you become a certified TMMi professional. What is being taught in such a course? Based on that, you should be able to explain to management, this is important, I think, or discuss with management, why is test process improvement important? So what's the business important for that? And moving back to Agile, the business value. We're not doing this for the sake of doing test process improvement. We're doing this to support some business objectives. And discuss with them a test policy. What are the things you want to discuss with them? That's things you learn in a TMMi professional course. You should be able to guide or advise an organization or projects using TMMi, both in a traditional sequential life cycle, but also in an Agile context. So in this course, we'll address both ways of using Agile, using TMMi, sorry. We also talk about how to interpret, how to use it. So interpretation is very, very important. We also discuss briefly the relationship with CMMi. For some, that may be important. And based on this, you should act or should be able to act as a co-assessor in informal assessments. You are not yet, to make clear, an accredited assessor. That's the next step. But you can say, hey, I've got enough knowledge if there is an informal assessments to participate and help. In general, we think you could participate in programs for improving test process in an organization or project. That's what a TMMi professional is able to do. That's basically step 1, looking at the TMMi career path. Oh, I'm skipping one slide here, I think. Yeah. Another one, which is probably the most easy one to do, and I would recommend all of you to start doing it, I would say today or tomorrow is go onto the TMMi website, and it says on a tile, become a member. You can actually become a member for free. You receive newsletters, I think at most once a month, with all the latest news on TMMi initiative, on the model, on presentations which are available, on papers that are being published, on new things that are happening. You can, based on that, become involved in TMMi working parties. And being a member, by the way, is also a requirement if you want to move to the next step in becoming an accredited assessor or a certified TMMi test post improver. And the good thing, as I said already, we are non-profit, so this is for free. Okay. Ways to become involved as a professional. Other ways to get involved is as an organization. Of course, ultimately, I would say we want people to say, yes, the model is great for the, I don't know if it exists, but the Canadian Bank or Canadian Healthcare Organization, or who knows. We want you to say, let's adopt it and try to achieve the benefits that you saw in the user survey. That's what we want. But Amanda was also talking about, we are building up the community. So I think what is also needed is there are companies who say, ooh, this is interesting. I want to become a local recognized training provider. I want to be the company that trains other people to understand TMMi better. So we need in Canada, in North America, recognized training providers who spread the knowledge, who train people in TMMi. We also need in Canada, in North America, so-called assessment service providers. Those companies who say, I can come to your company and I can independently do an informal or a quick scan or a formal assessment. We have lead assessors or assessors. These two, I would say, vehicles are needed for users to be successful. So as an organization, there's a commercial option, you might say, recognized training provider, assessment service provider, but ultimately we would like to see organizations become a user and adopt TMMi and achieve the benefits that we just discussed today. And maybe in the end become TMMi certified level 2, 3, 4, or even 5, who knows. Before we close, we said 1.5 hours, so we are pretty nice on time, I think. I ran a course recently, and in the end, I asked people, what did you like about TMMi? And the list was so, I would say, great. I thought it was great, and it was a good summary that I thought, oh, I might as well use this as a summary slide for this webinar. So what did they like? What did they say in the end? They said, first of all, we like TMMi very much because it's not so much model driven, it is objective driven. We should start from the business objectives, choose the parts that work best, study the goals, and take the ones that have most added value, which is very different than some other models. So objective driven. The second thing that he liked very much is that it was, you might say, iSQI related. The terminology in TMMi is the same as iSQI. Much of the content described in syllabi in iSQI, you can find back in different ways in the model. You might even say to some extent, TMMi is an iSQI implementation model. So iSQI related. And iSQI, of course, is the biggest or the world's wide leading certification program for test professionals. Well founded. It is not a commercial model developed by a commercial company in 2 months. It's been built with universities over a number of years. Clear priorities. If you are level 1, don't worry at all about 4 or 5. Worry about the 5 topics of level 2. So it gives you a clear focus what to do next. Self-assessments. It was clear as we do a course that initially a self-assessment is easy and could be step one. You don't have to go to a lead assessor to help you to say what is all missing, because step one you will find things missing very easily. In fact, after a TMMi professional course, you could probably go back to your own company and say, oh, I will do a sort of quick scan in my company, identifying some issues at level 2 or maybe 3. And only once that step is taken, I will go back to a more formal assessment. And of course, self-assessment is much cheaper, less costly than a formal external assessment. People also liked it because it's freely available. There's no payment like for IEEE or ISO standards or CMMi. Go to the website, download, good luck, and start using it. It can also be used with Agile, with DevOps. So there is if you want, almost ongoing development. An open community, you can become a member. And as I said already in the previous one, there's ongoing development as we're now looking at what does TMMi mean for artificial intelligence. It doesn't stop here. Further reading, well, we looked at, I think, the TMMi website several times already. So www.tmmi.org should get you most of the information. There are books available. You'll find on Amazon, on other likes. There are English books. I don't know how good you are in Chinese, but there are Chinese books. There are Dutch books. There will soon be Spanish books. There are also, by the way, some ebooks that you find on the website that are free for download, also possible. If you have any further questions, or next week you think, oh, I should have asked this to Erik, feel free, send me an email. I'm happy to help, put you in the right direction. Yeah, that's what I'm for. This is my goal, I would say. Not goal in life, but goal for this topic. Thank you very much. Any further questions? Debbie, to you. Or Amanda, to you.
Hi, Erik. Thank you so much for that. I can see people are watching, but they're a little bit shy in putting their questions to you. So I think there's a lot of the stuff there for them to take in. Thank you. You mentioned about training providers and people interested in providing assessment services. What do they usually do? Do they contact Amanda if they're local in Canada and have a chat to the local chapter in the first instance?
Both ways happen. Some are known to, I'll say, the local community. They will talk to Amanda and say, hey, I'm interested in becoming one. And then she'll put it in contact with the one centrally, and we can together organize. For training providers, there are ways also to license material if they want. Some want to develop it themselves. It's all possible. But I think the main step, the first step, is always to go back to your local chapter contact person, which in this case is Amanda. And she should be able to help. And if not, she knows where to get the help, I would say. Yep. But yeah, as I said already, I think both are important to get the ball rolling. I don't believe personally that you can depend on, let's say, European training providers to run the training in Canada and help you get the job done. That's the way to start. Mm-hmm. Perfect. But if you want to be successful in Canada, you need local people to do it locally.
Yep, we agree as well. So hopefully we get some more interest from here and more people looking to be those training providers, and we can get going.
Okay. Absolutely. And if anybody needs contact details for Amanda or Erik, then please drop us a line and I'll very happily provide those in addition to what you've just, Erik's just shared for you. So I think we've come to the end of this session.
Yeah.
Again,
maybe one thing to add, I already said that, but I saw recently also someone was presenting at a conference. I was unfamiliar with the conference in French about TMMi. So there is, I think, also a huge community, I think, in Canada who speaks is French speaking. Mm-hmm. And the good thing is we have a French local chapter as one of the first that actually became a local chapter. And they have done the job of translating the model, the syllabus, the exam. So I think mostly, or almost everything is also available in French, which I think for Canada is hugely important as far as I can see.
Yep.
That's great, and I know we definitely got the exam available, Amanda, so it's good news. So both of you, thank you ever so much. Thank you, Erik, especially for your time today, and Amanda, thank you for helping to run the session, for supporting us in putting it together. Any questions, please do drop a line to any of us, and hopefully we'll see you both again very, very soon. Take care, everybody. Thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.